Thanks, Jono, for that reading. Seems a very confronting chapter at first, but there's also obviously some encouragement we can get from it, and we're going to call Brother Jona Lawson to give us that encouragement now. Thanks, Brother Jona.
And good afternoon, everyone. Bit more of a punch. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, that's right. We've got to get through 2 studies, all right? So we need to just get ourselves a little bit focused. Now, that was pretty insulting, wasn't it? Like, to introduce me as from New South Wales. I was actually born in Adelaide, and then I'm from Victoria. So to be called someone from New South Wales, like, absolute worst insult that you can possibly get. Right? I know how to kick a football, right, properly, because I'm Victorian, probably better than most of you. Now, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a little bit of deja vu because, it's a long time ago. It's amazing how quick the years go, but I think it was 13 years ago I stood up here and did this exact same 2 talks, right? I don't know whether they realised that when they invited me back here, whether they thought those talks were awesome. I'm not sure that was the case. I think it was because they'd just completely forgotten it was that long ago. But 13 years ago, I came here and did these 2 talks. So you must operate on a cycle, right? And we've got back to that cycle, and we've just said, okay, yep, let's contact him again. And he said yes again. So we're looking at Joshua chapter 10, which is an amazing chapter. In fact, I believe it's Joshua's greatest victory. Out of all the victories that he's had so far, this is the actual pinnacle of it. In fact, it said that in that chapter. It said, there was no day like this before or after what happened here on this day. And there's some amazing things happen. In fact, it also says that it was so incredible that it was one of the very few events that got recorded in a book called the Book of Jasher, which is the Book of the Upright. Now, I wonder, in fact, there's only this event and one other event in the whole Bible that's recorded in the Book of Jasher, and I wonder whether anyone could tell me what that was, and the prize for telling me what that was will be 1 Tic Tac, okay? Orange, because they're the awesome ones, right? And this one I notice is called Express Yourself, and there's actual expressions on the Tic Tac, so very worthwhile prize to get. Does anyone know what the other event in the Bible is that was recorded in the Book of Jasher? Because it said this was one of them. So amazing with this day, and there's so much amazing things that happen in this day. They said, get this one down in the Book of Jasher. Does anyone else know what was in the Book of Jasher? It's a hard question. The Song of the Bow, absolutely correct. And where is that? You're the chairman, so I can't really give you the prize. 2 Samuel 1, and what was it about? I didn't tell you. That's right, David's lament for Jonathan. You imagine how much that meant to him, and he said, Jonathan was everything to him. And he's like, that is going into the Book of Jasher. And both of these things, we don't know what else was in the Book of Jasher, but just these 2 things we know about were in the Book of Jasher. All right? So that's how important this day was. Now, you're going to get this, and it's got... No, that one's... I'm not going to give you that one, because that's too cool. All right. Give you this one. All right? There's a set of lips on it, okay? Whether there's a prophecy or something. But you can have that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it directly into your mouth. All right? So just open your mouth. No. And that was not my throw, that was your catch, all right? That was wrong. So, that's how amazing this event was. It got in the Book of Jasher. Now, I just remembered that I'm supposed to unmute this. Oh no, it was already unmuted, so I must have done that before. So you've got all my singing on the recording. That would be a very priceless recording. Now, the reason why it was so amazing, you think about what happened in this chapter. Amazing things. There was an undefeatable enemy, an enemy that was too big and too huge that there was no way that the people of Gibeon were going to be able to destroy it. And they needed a saviour. And that saviour was the man Joshua. And he stood up and said, I will save you. There was a pursuit down, like a treacherous pursuit down a mountain and down rocks for this enemy. There was God involved in this pursuit. In fact, he got physically involved and he sent down coals of fire from heaven. He sent down hailstones to destroy this enemy. The sun stopped. That's probably the most amazing thing about this story. The actual sun stopped, and we'll get there to our story. There were tombs in this thing where they put the enemy in and they rolled the stone over the tomb. They then got the enemy and they hung the enemy up on the tree, and they did that all day until evening so that everyone could see the fruits of this victory that that Joshua had. And there was deliverance at the end. And finally, after it was all finished, Joshua had all this inheritance which he was able to pass out to all of the children of Israel for themselves to take. And we're going to talk about that inheritance tonight and what that inheritance was and how they were to go and get it themselves. So, an amazing story that there's so much in here that we can learn from. So let's look at verse 1 of this story. It says, it came to pass when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai and utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and her king, so he had done to Ai, the king, and her king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with the children of Israel. So this is where we are. Here we are here. We've got the children of Israel, and they've obviously moved in and taken these key cities. Jericho's been taken. They're in Gilgal. And over here, Gibeon, in the previous chapter, which I think you did last class, was that correct? For those of you who are here? Last class you looked at Gibeon. And they are now in the staple of Joshua. But they didn't get conquered, did they? The Gibeonites actually had made peace, and that's what he says in verse 1. These kings all get together and they say, the children of Israel have made peace with Gibeon. And here were the kings that all came together. We've got the king of Jerusalem. Interesting, this is the first chapter in the Bible that Jerusalem is mentioned. And we hear about here the king of Jerusalem. Now these guys are scared, aren't they? Because they've seen Israel come in, they've taken Jericho, that huge city, and now they're moving in, and it says, now they've taken Gibeon, and Gibeon have made a peace league with them. Okay? They've made a peace league with them. Now, this is why they're so scared. Look at verse 2 says, and they feared greatly because Gibeon was a great city and one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all the men thereof were mighty. So these guys were no pushover. They were like one of the strongest cities in the land. And they'd actually now made peace with the children of Israel. So all the rest of these kings in the southern area are starting to get very worried about what's going to happen to them. Now, the Gibeonites were awesome. They were unreal. In many ways, they're like a type of us. Because you think about what they did in the last chapter, is they were powerful. They were a royal city. But they'd been prepared to give up all of that power and all of that city because they'd heard about the fame of God. Very similar to what Rahab did, actually, when she had heard about the fame of God. And they thought, there's no way that we're going to be able to defeat this God. We've heard about him and what he's done. And so they came and they made a covenant of peace with Joshua. They did it pretty deceptively, though, didn't they? But they made a covenant of peace with Joshua, and they were adopted into the family of Israel. They became part of the family of Israel. Okay? And now they're in trouble. They're in deep trouble. Because these 5 kings have recognised Gibeon, and they think, well, the only thing we can do at the moment is we need to go and take out the Gibeonites. They've made peace with these people. They're traitors. We need to go and take them out. And that's what they say. Verse 3. Wherefore Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, said unto Horam, king of Hebron, and unto Piram, king of Jarmuth, and unto Japhia, king of Lachish, and unto Debir, king of Eglon, they said, Come unto me and help me, that we might go and smite Gibeon, for it has made peace with the children of Israel, Therefore, verse 5, the 5 kings of the Amorites, and the kings of Jerusalem, and the kings of Hebron, and the kings of Jarmuth, and the kings of Lachish, they all gathered themselves together, and they encamped in war against Gibeon. So all these guys got together, the 5 kings of the Amorites, and they said, let's go and take over Gibeon, because these guys have been traitors to us. Right? They've been traitors. Now, these guys were the Amorites, and the chairman, I can't remember what your name was, sorry. Josh said to us at the start, he said, pretty gruesome sort of chapter. And this is a gruesome chapter. And we think, was all this necessary, all this killing that Joshua done? Like, couldn't he have gone in like he did with Gibeah and sort of done a deal with these guys and said, oh, can you know, we can all be friends here and you can be part of what we're doing? Why did God have to go through like this and destroy these kings in this way? Well, the only reason is because these kings were so wicked, and God knew in his foreknowledge that if he left these kings in place, they would have infiltrated the children of Israel, and they would slowly but surely have taken away their faith. In the same way that God says to you and me, don't go and marry someone outside the meeting. Because inevitably that person will affect you in the way you live and take you away from God. And we think, oh, that's a bit unfair, right? Why didn't they get a chance to do that? Well, God had given them a chance, okay? I put this in the wrong spot, but this is back in Genesis chapter 15, verse 16. This is when God first said to Abraham, you know what? One day your descendants are going to come and they're going to take over this particular land, right? He said, it's going to happen, he said to Abraham, in 400 years' time. He said, and they shall come back here. That's what he says. Your people are going to come back here, and they're going to come back in the 4th generation, about 400 years' time. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So God said, you know what? I'm going to give these guys an opportunity to be forgiven, to come to me. And I'm going to give them so much time. In fact, he gave them 400 years. And some of them did come to God, didn't they? The Gibeonites were one of them. Rahab was another one. And maybe there were other people that came to God in that time. So it wasn't like God gave these people no chance. He gave those people every opportunity to repent and come to him before he finally decided, I need to act. And that's what God's doing now, isn't it? We think, how come Jesus is taking so long to come back and return? The reason why is because God is giving this world every last opportunity they can to come to him and to repent before his son does come. And that's what Joshua and God were doing here to these Amorites. But it had come to the point where he's like, I need to go and destroy them because they are an evil force. They represented a sinful group of people. And they were now coming against the Gibeonites. Now, the Gibeonites, terrified, aren't they? Look what they say in verse 6. And the men of Gibeon said unto Joshua and to the camp of Gilgal, saying, so they sent a message to him, and they said, slack not your hand against our servants, against your servants. Come unto us quickly, and save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the mountains are gathered against us. So they said, we're finished. We're facing an enemy here which there is no way possible that we can defeat. It's too big for us. And the only thing that we can do is call upon this man Joshua to help us. We need him to help us, because if he doesn't help us, we're gone. The NET version says, don't abandon us, please. We need you to come and save us. Now, Joshua could have, couldn't he, based on their behaviour, because remember the previous chapter, been a little bit dodgy, okay, dressed in the old stuff, and they'd come to him and they'd lied, right? So based on their behaviour, there was no reason why Joshua should have gone and saved them. But they come to him and say, we've made a covenant with you. Please, save us. We need you. We've got this huge enemy here, which is too big for us. There's no way we can fight against it. Please save us. Now Joshua receives that call. What does he do? Verse 7. And Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valour. He responded, and he responded in a huge way. He could have said, those guys have been a little bit dodgy. Just send like a couple of people across to help them out. No, he says, these people are in a covenant of peace with me. We send everyone. All of the mightiest men that we possibly could. So Joshua takes this call for salvation very, very, very seriously. And he takes everyone with him to bring deliverance to the people. Doesn't mess around, brings the full force of his powers. Now, look what he does. Look what he's prepared to do in verse 8. And Yahweh said unto Joshua, fear them not, for I have delivered them into your hand, and there shall not a man stand before you. So Joshua goes and prays to God, and he says, we need to go and save these people that we're in a covenant of peace with. And God assures Joshua that he'll be with him and he will help them go and save these Gibeonites. And it was team effort here. God says to Joshua here, I will be with you to help you to defeat this enemy. And we will save these Gibeonites, and all of the rest of the people are going to be destroyed. And it's going to be a joint effort here. And it does. As you read this record, this battle is a joint effort between God and Joshua. Joshua is calling to God in prayer, and God is responding with and throwing down hailstones and stuff. And Joshua then is talking with God, and it's a team effort by God and Joshua to respond to what the Gibeonites' plight was and to save them. And they do it in a very real and a very powerful way. Now you look how seriously Joshua took this call for help from the Gibeonites. Look what he's prepared to do. Verse 9. Joshua therefore came unto them suddenly. The word means instantly, straight away. So he didn't say, okay, that's good. Let's do some planning. I've got some stuff to do this weekend. Maybe after that we'll get to it and we'll go and save those guys. No. Everything else was put away instantly. And this became the number one priority of this man and all his mighty men, and God with them, to save these Gibeonites. They came unto them instantly and suddenly. And they went up from Gilgal, it says, all night. Right? All night they travelled. So he said, put everything away right now. We are leaving instantly. He went into the tents of all these guys, right? They're playing Scrabble or chess or something in the tents. He said, put it all down. We need to go instantly. And he's like, well, it's 6 o'clock. We just had tea, right? We're just about to go to bed, right? And he says, instantly we are going to go and we're going to travel 25 kilometres on foot overnight to save these people. See the effort that Joshua's putting in to save these people? He's prepared to stay up all night. Now, sometimes in life, we do stay up all night, don't we, to get something really important done. It's usually when we've squandered away our time and it comes down to the very last minute before the exam, or we've got some assignment to do, right? And we have to stay up all night to do it. But it's something really important that would force us to do that, doesn't it? Most of the time you get to 1, you're like, it's actually not that important, right? And if you pushed all the way through to 6 in the morning, my goodness, that would be an important thing to do, wouldn't it? Well, look what Joshua's prepared to do. Drop everything. Drop everything and get to the Gibeonites and travel 25 kilometres all night to do it with all of his best men. And God's there right with him. We think, gee whiz, do these guys really deserve that? They seriously deserve what these people, what Joshua and his men are doing for them? That's what they were prepared to do for the Gibeonites. And they make their way all night to Gibeon. And when they arrive there, at Gibeon, they encounter this league of 5 kings who have come to destroy Gibeon. And the next few chapters are about how they destroyed them. It says there in verse 10, "And Yahweh discomfited them before Israel. And he slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon. And he chased them along the way that goeth to Beth Horon, and he smote them to Azekah and to Makkedah. And it came to pass, as they fled from before Israel, they were going down to Beth Horon, and Yahweh cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died. And there were more that died in the hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword." So they encounter this huge army of people at Jerusalem. And straight away in this battle, who gets involved? God gets involved in a most unbelievable and dramatic way. And it's almost those 2 verses, 10 and 11, are a description not of what the children of Israel were doing. They would have been amazed. They come here with all their swords and everything, and all of a sudden the whole battle almost gets taken out of their hands, and God does everything. And he's throwing down hailstones upon these men as they approach Gibeon, and then then they started to retreat, and he chased them. Now, it's quite a dramatic terrain around here. I suppose this picture doesn't really show you at all what it's like. If you have been to Israel, it's quite a dramatic sort of mountainous place, all right? And they came to Gibeon, and then once they had attacked and killed these enemies, the enemy ran up here onto Beth Horon. And that's what these 2 verses are describing. And it describes this chase that took place. It was about 35 or 40 kilometres. They chased them down this mountain, and the whole way, God is striking this enemy as they go down. Now, here is and they chase them all the way through the valley of Ajalon and down to Makkedah and Azekah. They chased them all the way down here until they finally destroyed them in Makkedah. Now, here is a beautiful cross-section, which maybe some of the people here only who are involved in building or something could appreciate fully. But this here is a cross-section of the land of Israel, taken right across here. And you can see how dramatic the land goes up. And they were right on the top of here when they attacked Gibeon, and they chased them all the way down this mountain, verse 10 and 11, as they were going down here. So it was treacherous terrain that they were going down. And God was striking them with stones all the way down here. And God was helping that enemy. In fact, what it says is, the end of verse 11, it said, "And they whom the children of Israel they who died by the hailstones were much more than the children of Israel slew with the sword." So God was doing the majority of this work as they made their way down this mountain. Now, give you an idea of how big this is. Does anyone know how tall Mount Lofty is? Who said that? 500 metres? A bit higher. It's about 750 metres, okay? So this here is close to 1,000 metres high. So Mount Lofty, not dissimilar actually, to Mount Lofty is probably about this high. So it'd be like them chasing them down one side of Mount Lofty down into the plain of Adelaide. That's about exactly what happened, right? Chase them right down here. And God worked with Joshua and with his men to bring those people under control as they made their way down. And as I said, Joshua is communicating with God as they race down the mountain. And he says in verse 12 to God, "Then spoke Joshua unto Yahweh that day, when Yahweh delivered the Amorites before the children of Israel." So it's God's battle ultimately. He's winning the victory. But Joshua communicates with him, and he says to him, "Son, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed until the people had avenged their enemies. Is it not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and hasted not to go down a whole day, verse 13 tells us. So the Hebrew says that Joshua requested that the sun would stop, and God stood the sun still in the sky. So he obviously didn't have enough time. He realised as he was making his way down this mountain, he's not going to have enough time to be able to defeat all of these enemies in the amount of time. And so he asks God to help him, to give him some more time to be able to defeat all of those enemies. And God responds by holding the sun still in the sky. Now, we don't know exactly how that happened, and there's all these different theories about exactly how it happened, whether it was some kind of eclipse or whether how the sun stopped in its way. But one thing's for sure is that everyone would have known about it, wouldn't they? They would have known about the sun standing still that day and realised the importance of that day. You can imagine the enemy as they're running around thinking, surely the sun's going to go down soon and we're going to be able to escape from these people. And the sun stayed in the sky all day, and God responded to what Joshua had asked him to do. A massive extended day. There was so much achieved on this particular day. And verse 14 says this: there was no day like it before or after it, that Yahweh hearkened unto the voice of the man, for Yahweh fought for Israel. So amazing was this day that he says there wasn't any day before or like it. But notice that it doesn't say that was because of the sun standing still, even though that was an amazing thing. It says the reason why that day was so amazing was because it was a day that God listened to the voice of a man and responded to it by defeating the enemy of him. That's why the day was so amazing. Even though it contained the sun standing still and all these amazing other things that God had done on that day, the main thing which stood that day out was that God responded to the voice of a man. Now, verse 16, these kings are on the run. He's got them on the run after he's run down this particular mountain, and he runs down into the rest of these cities. And it says there in verse 17, and it was told Joshua, saying, the 5 kings are found hidden in a cave at Makkedah. So if you come down here, they chased them all this way, and the kings ran forward. They realised they were finished, and they're hiding in a cave at Makkedah. And Joshua says to them, right, what we need to do is secure our enemy in this tomb that was the den. And so they put the 5 kings in there, and they roll the stone over, and they secure the enemies in there. Then Joshua says to them, right, I need you to continue on fighting this battle until it's completed, until it's finished. Verse 19. He says, and stay ye not, but pursue after your enemies, and smite the hindermost of them, and suffer them not to enter into their cities, for Yahweh your God has delivered them into your hand. This is the method by which Joshua defeated his enemies and defeated all of his enemies, was he was relentless in his pursuit. Okay? He says you need to go and get the hindermost of them, and that means, in the Hebrew, the tail of them, right? Don't let the tail of them be left. Then he goes on to say in verse 20, and it came to pass that Joshua and the children of Israel made an end of slaying them. Verse 19, after that semicolon, he says, as well as making sure you slay the tail, he says, suffer them not to enter into their cities. So I don't want you to let them go into the cities either. And the reason why he didn't want them to go into their cities was because as soon as they'd go into the cities, what would they do? Well, they would regroup again, and they would reform again, and they would become a force to be reckoned with. And Joshua emphasised that point. If we're going to get rid of this enemy, we need to make sure we do a complete job. And the reason why he emphasised that is because in our next study that we'll look at in them trying to get their own inheritance, what Joshua found was that many of the tribes left remnants of people in cities, and they grew until they took over again. But Joshua's method of defeating the enemy was a complete method. He pursued until the enemy was completely gone and destroyed. That's how you defeat the enemy. Now, that's a principle that we can all learn from, and we'll look at some of those principles about how we fight our enemies tonight. But one of them, of course, is we've got to try and destroy sins and errors in our life right to the very last. And we'll have a look at that a little bit further tonight. But that's what Joshua did. He made sure he destroyed his enemies completely so that they didn't regroup. And it says then in verse 20 that he made a thorough end to his enemies. And it came to pass that Joshua and the children of Israel had made an end of slaying them with a very great slaughter till they were consumed. And that word means until they were completely finished. So he pursued them until they were gone. The enemy was completely finished. And once he had completely destroyed the enemy, verse 22 said that he goes back to the city of Makkedah where he'd hidden these 5 kings. And he makes sure that when he goes back to this cave at Makkedah that he's going to completely destroy these kings. And he does that from verse 22. It says, he opens the caves and he took out the 5 kings. And verse 24 says, and it came to pass that they brought out the kings of Joshua, and Joshua called all the men of Israel unto the captains of the men of war, which went with him, and they said, come near and put your feet on the necks of these kings. That was quite brutal, wasn't it? He gets these 5 kings and he puts them down on the ground and he says, I want you to put your foot on their necks. You think, wow, what's he trying to teach them there? Put their foot on their necks. And Joshua was showing, wasn't he, that he had brought his enemy under complete control. Look how much control he's got on them. They're not going anywhere, are they? He's got his foot on their neck. He had brought his enemy under complete control. And he wanted to show his captains that that's what I want you to do when you go out and pursue your enemy. I've brought these kings under complete control. And the reason why he did that, and we talked about that earlier, was because he knew that these kings needed to be destroyed, because if they didn't, if they weren't destroyed, they would go on to get into the lives of all of the rest of the children of Israel. These kings needed to be destroyed. They represented sin, and they needed to be destroyed. Then what does he do to the kings? Well, he then takes the 5 kings and he kills them in front of the children of Israel. And he says to them, fear not nor be dismayed, verse 25. Be strong and of good courage, for Yahweh your God has given your enemies into your hand. Yahweh do unto all your enemies as he has done to these. And then he took those 5 kings, and one of them was the king of Israel. I mean, not king of Israel, the king of Jerusalem. And he put those 5 kings up onto trees. And he hung those 5 kings up on a tree. And those 5 kings hung on those trees as a witness to everyone else who came and looked upon them, that that's what Joshua thought of those sinful kings. He wanted everyone to see that. And he wanted to see that all those kings and what they represented needed to be destroyed. It was a warning, wasn't it, to all the rest of the kingdoms around. And they stayed there all day until evening. They hung up there, the king of Jerusalem, as a witness to what Joshua knew God thought about those sinful kings. They hung up there all day. Then, once the day was finished, it says, verse 27, and it came to pass at the time of the going down of the sun that Joshua commanded, and they took them down off the trees, and they cast them into the cave whereon they had been hid. And he laid great stones on the cave's mouth, which remained unto this very day. So once that day was finished, they took down those 5 kings, and they took those 5 kings and they put them in a tomb or a den. And he rolled the stone over the face of that den, and it said they stayed there forever, never to come out again. And Joshua walked away from that day victorious. The 5 kings of the Amorites, the sinful kings of the Amorites, completely destroyed. And Joshua has won this amazing victory. Now, that victory in chapter 10 goes on to be the key victory of the whole military campaign, because the next chapter, in chapter 10, and then the subsequent chapters show that the rest of the kings fell very quickly. And Joshua was able to take complete control of that land. The enemy was destroyed. And once the enemy was destroyed, what did he have? Look at chapter 11. The end of chapter 11 says, chapter 11 and verse 23, after all these kingdoms had been destroyed, verse 23 says, so Joshua took the whole land according to all that Yahweh had said unto Moses, and Joshua gave it for an inheritance unto the children of Israel according to their divisions by their tribes, and the land rested from war. So all the enemies were destroyed, and Joshua now has this inheritance. And he's able to give that inheritance to all of the children of Israel as a result of the victory that he has won. And verse 28 of chapter 10 says, and that day Joshua took Makkedah, and he smote it with the edge of the sword, and he utterly destroyed them and all the souls that were therein, and he let none remain until the king of Makkedah. And he did that unto the king of unto the king of Makkedah as he had done unto the king of Jericho. So everyone was destroyed, and it was an amazing day. Now you imagine those guys when they got back into their little sleeping bags at night, into their tents, and they thought about what had happened that day. It was absolutely incredible, wasn't it? They had seen Gibeon in trouble, nowhere to go. They had seen Joshua respond to that with such zealousness, and he responded with God, and he'd worked with God in prayer, and he had chased down the enemy, and he'd pursued the enemy, and he'd taken down that enemy until every last one of them was completely destroyed. And then he took that enemy, and he put that enemy up onto a tree, and he made everyone look at that tree and look at those kings on that tree, and they represented sin. And then he took down those kings off that tree, and he put them into a tomb, and he rolled a stone over that tomb, and he said, never again will that enemy come out of that tomb. And Joshua exited out of that, and he was victorious. What an unbelievable story, as they were at night talking about it with each other in their sleeping bags. And we think, wow, that was a cool story. But what does that story mean to you and me here in 2018, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later? What does that possibly mean to you and me? Well, that story is a parable, isn't it? And it's a beautiful parable of the greatest day in human history, about the greatest man that ever existed, and the victory that he won. And the victory he won, brothers and sisters, was using the techniques just like Joshua did. And that, of course, was Jesus Christ. You think about how beautifully our God has woven the story, his story, into this story of Joshua. We're just like the Gibeonites, aren't we? And we face an enemy, and that enemy is sin, and we can't defeat it. There is no possible way that we can defeat sin in our lives. And all we can do is go to God once we realise that and say, God, save me. And we say that not on the basis of our behaviour or how good we are, because our behaviour's not that good most of the time, isn't it? But what did God do in response to that? Well, look at Hezekiah says. Not Hezekiah. Isaiah. Say to those who have an anxious heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. With the recompense of God, he will come and he will save you. God has responded to our need. And he sent his Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. And did Jesus Christ respond to our need? You think about how seriously Jesus Christ took our need. He knew, brothers and sisters and young people, our plight. And so he gave everything, every ounce of his life to that cause. You think about what Jesus gave up. He gave up everything in life that we enjoy. He gave up marriage. He gave up all the things that other young people might do because he dedicated himself fully and 100% to the purpose of what his Father wanted him to do. And he worked with his Father to overcome sin in his life and to ultimately win that victory. And he was relentless in his pursuit. This is Psalm 18. Psalm 18's got so many references to this whole story, but this is talking about Jesus in the same way as Joshua had a pursuit after his enemy. This is the way Jesus pursued after his enemy. You gave me a wide place and my steps under me, and my feet did not slip. I pursued my enemies and I overtook them. I did not turn back and they were consumed. I thrust them through so that they were not able to rise. They fell under my feet. And every day Jesus pursued after his enemy, wasn't it? After sin. And he overcame that every day with the help of his Father. John 19 says that Jesus followed that pursuit right through to the end, just like Joshua did. When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and he gave up the spirit. So he pursued sin his whole life until it was completely destroyed, like Joshua did and Jesus did on the cross. And after his enemy was destroyed, ultimately, Jesus brought his enemy under submission. Psalm 18 says this, "Thou hast also given me the necks of mine enemies, that I might destroy them that hate me." Jesus completely destroyed sin. And we think about Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, where Jesus brought sin under submission and he crushed the head of the serpent. That's what he did when he was upon the cross. Matthew chapter 27 says, once he had done that, he was taken, and in the words of Joshua and the words of Matthew chapter 27, it says, so he went and made the sepulchre sure, and he sealed the stone, and they set a watch, and was buried in that tomb. Ultimately, Jesus buried sin and death. And Hebrews 2 verse 14 says that. It says, through death, he might destroy the one who has the power of death. That is the devil. And Jesus achieved that victory in his life and finally in his death, like Joshua did also. And he buried sin and death in that tomb. But the greatest thing about that day, and remember that day is very similar as well, because it was also a day that God stopped the sun. And God stopped the sun while his Son was upon the cross. And he did it so that all the world might see that what was happening here was incredible. And so he stopped the sun while his Son was upon the cross. But what that made that day so amazing, just like the day of Joshua, was not so much that the sun stood still, even though that was incredible. It was because this day, likewise, was a day in which God listened to the voice of a man. God was prepared to listen to the voice of a man. And he'd watched his Son, hadn't he, his whole life, be so obedient to him. And now he watched him on that last day. The point of obedience that his Son was prepared to go to was to die for him. And finally, he did give up the Spirit. And God said, I'm prepared to listen to that voice. And what did Jesus say on the cross that God would listen to? He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And on the basis of what Jesus achieved in his life, God was prepared to save us and forgive us. And that's what he does. And so we get the benefits, don't we? Just like the children of Israel did. We get the benefits of that victory. Therefore, this is what Jesus achieved. Therefore, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance. So just as the children of Israel were going to be given an opportunity at having an inheritance, what Jesus achieved gives us inheritance as well. But not just an ordinary inheritance, eternal inheritance. Since a death has occurred that redeems them from their transgressions committed under the first covenant. As a result of what Jesus has done, we are forgiven. And we can be given this eternal inheritance. Romans puts it like this. In all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. That's what Jesus and the Father achieved through his life, and then ultimately on the last day of his death, they achieved eternal inheritance that could be given to all of us. Now, you think about the people, as I said, who were in their sleeping bags that night and they were thinking about what happened in that day. You think about who, out of all those people, would have felt the most thankful. It probably would have been the Gibeonites, wouldn't it? As they lied there in their sleeping bags and thought about what Joshua had been prepared to do for them. To put everything else, to lay it all on the line, to save them. And all their kiddies, all their kiddies in a tent. And they think, that's what he was prepared to do. And as a result of him and everything he's done, me and my little family are saved. Now, they responded, brothers and sisters and young people, to what Joshua had done, and they responded in service to him. They just wanted to serve him. And you know what? The Gibeonites, we find out that the Gibeonites, over 900 years later, in the book of Nehemiah, we find them there as a faithful group of people. You know what they're still doing? They're still serving God. And they've been motivated, haven't they, from that day, from everything that Joshua had done for them. And they passed that along in their families. It became their motivation for service. And that becomes our motivation, or should be, our motivation for service. When we think about, as this story has portrayed, everything that the Father and the Son have been prepared to do to save you and me. Everything. They put everything else aside and they said, we need to save mankind. And they were prepared to go to the point where God said, I will sacrifice my own son to save them. And they devised that plan and they worked together to bring that about. And they did that to hopefully provide that motivation for us. That we might say, you know what? I want to be part of that. I want to gain my inheritance that has been achieved by that victory. And I want to be motivated to go out and serve because of that. Now, tonight, when we look at our next study, we're going to be looking at how we then take our inheritance. Joshua's given it to the people and said, look at everything I've done to achieve inheritance. You now need to go out and take it. And that's what God has done for us. He's achieved this amazing victory. And he says to us now, go and take it. That's all you've got to do. If you want it, I've achieved it, come and take it. And we're going to see a man who did just that tonight, who went out and took it. And we'll learn from him how we can do that in our own life. Go out and take it.